We're not really prepared for what's coming. We're not really prepared for what's coming. This sentence was recently said by the famous ufologist Jacques Vallée when commenting on things he has observed lately. He openly says that while the world was getting lost in videos of strange lights and blurry sighting reports, something was being prepared, something hidden which is now about to be revealed. He says there is a pattern, and this pattern is right before our eyes. Recently, Jacques Vallée took part in an interview on Joe Rogan's podcast, and there he once again repeated what he has been saying for decades: the shape of unidentified flying objects, especially those that appear in sensitive areas such as nuclear facilities or atomic test sites, is not random. Many of these objects have the shape of a metallic egg. And according to him, this shape is not just aesthetic. It's symbolic, functional, ritualistic, or perhaps a signature. But to understand what Jacques Vallée meant by this statement, we first need to go back in time, more precisely to 1945, when the Trinity case happened. Oh, Carol, what do you mean by Trinity case? Well, that's the name of the first nuclear bomb detonated by humanity. And just a few weeks before the first nuclear explosion in human history, the infamous Trinity detonation carried out in the New Mexico desert, two boys, Jose Padilla, 9 years old, and Remy Vaca, 7, witnessed what may be the first documented modern unidentified flying object incident happening 2 years before Roswell. According to Jacques Vallée, who investigated the case for decades and published his findings in the book The Best Kept Secret, these boys found an egg-shaped craft that had crashed on a ranch. The structure was damaged and partially burned with fragments scattered on the ground. The vegetation around it had been completely burned. And the most disturbing thing, small, restless humanoid creatures could be seen through small windows inside the craft. Scared, the boys fled and alerted the adults. Within hours, the American army had arrived. The area was sealed off, the craft removed, and fragments collected. And silence fell like a lead curtain over the case because no newspaper published the story. And you probably never heard about this story. You only know about the Roswell case because this other one was even more covered up. No television channel talks about it, and no YouTube channel repeats this story. But the boys told the same story with the same details throughout their entire lives. And this is exactly the case that Jacques Vallée studied. But why is this important after all for our conversation here? Because this would mark the first direct interaction between an unidentified flying object on Earth and in a highly symbolic context, the explosion of a nuclear bomb. Jacques Vallée believes that there is a direct correlation between these sightings and humanity's destructive technological advances, as if these intelligences, or whatever they are, were watching, warning, intervening, or even reacting. Now let's move forward a bit to 1964, when in the city of Socorro, also in New Mexico, the protagonist police officer Lonnie Zamora, while chasing a suspicious vehicle, witnessed something surreal. An egg-shaped craft resting on 4 metallic supports with 2 agitated humanoids outside. When he approached, the object took off and left behind burn marks on the ground, footprints, and physical impressions. The FBI and Air Force arrived and the area was cordoned off. Soil analysis, photos, and measurements were taken. Everything was documented, and this is one of the most well-documented cases in ufology, but even so, it was hushed up and ignored. Now pay attention to how the pattern repeats itself. The oval shape, the short and agitated humanoids, the physical signs on the ground, and the appearance at key moments in the history of human technology. Because the Socorro case wasn't the only one, no. In 1965, we had another case, this time in France. Maurice Massé, a farmer and former member of the French resistance, was in his field when he saw a small craft, also egg-shaped, and two humanoid beings near it. One of the beings pointed at the device, and a paralyzing ray struck the man. He was immobilized but conscious. The sight was analyzed by 5 French government agencies, and there were changes in the soil, marks, and chemical traces. Massé was a man of impeccable reputation. He never sought fame, never profited from this story. But he told what he saw, and he remained faithful to his original version until his last day of life. Jacques Vallée highlighted in this interview on Joe Rogan's podcast the importance of real research, in-person interviews, and field documentation. He laments that nowadays ufology has turned into a light show, blurry videos, computer montages, and shallow speculation done by people who just want internet fame like Will. He criticizes that these new investigators don't get off the couch, don't analyze the physical data, and don't care about what's actually there on the ground. He also talks about something very curious, the fact that these interstellar travelers crossing galaxies have always been here, coexisting with us on different planes of reality. This hypothesis is bolder and more denied, and interestingly also the most feared by skeptics because it can't be refuted with telescopes, radars, or rockets. Jacques Vallée proposes in this interview that the unidentified flying object phenomenon is interdimensional, and that the flying objects, especially the oval-shaped ones like in the Trinity, Socorro, and even in France cases, do not cross space, but rather the veil that separates the dimensions. And according to him, this crossing is not just physical. It is psychic, symbolic, and ritualistic. During the interview, he also states that the interest of these biological entities that visit us is a tuned interest. In other words, from entities aligned with the level of humanity's consciousness. Entities that manifest differently depending on the mental, emotional, and spiritual state of the observer. And he states, the human mind is a part of the equation. We are not just observers, we are catalysts. This line of thought also connects with the accounts of Jacques Barber, the former officer who reported having participated in secret missions to recover unidentified objects, all with oval or spherical shapes using military helicopters. According to Barber, whom I've already mentioned to you here, the objects were completely metallic, with no doors, no windows, no propulsion, no wings or markings, just metal eggs, which he jokingly says must have been laid by a metallic chicken. Jack Barber, or Jacob Barber for those less familiar, says he didn't know where they came from or how they got there. But the whole operation was extremely silent, secretive, and coordinated. Jacques Vallée compares these reports with cases from past decades and identifies the mathematical repetition of the phenomenon.
The shape of the object.
The presence of small creatures and the emotional reaction of the witness. The electromagnetic alteration of the environment, the mental and psychological interference, and he says, this is not random. All of this is part of a huge script. According to Jacques Vallée, the shape of these objects, that is, these egg-shaped objects, are not vehicles. They are archetypes because the egg is a symbol of birth, transition, and passage between worlds. And maybe, for that very reason, these ships appear at moments of historical rupture, like during the first nuclear test at the beginning of the space age, at the start of major wars, or before catastrophic events. According to him, the phenomenon may be interacting with the human psyche in some way that we still don't understand. What, after all, do these entities want with us? Are they just observing? Trying to prevent something? Or could they be planting seeds of control, of myths, of religions, of beliefs? Could they be planting ideas in us? Jacques Vallée said in that interview that he is sure these apparitions throughout history are behind the formation of various spiritual and doctrinal systems. In the book Messengers of Deception, he details how certain modern sects were based on contacts with supposed extraterrestrials who gave orders, instructions, and messianic visions. And a very clear example of this is the example of Scientology. We already have a full video here on the channel explaining how Scientology is based on this issue of contact with extraterrestrials. I'll link the video in the cards and description. If you haven't watched it, it's worth a look. He also talks about an even more disturbing hypothesis, that these entities might be shaping human civilization like someone tending a herd, not with weapons but with symbols. This theory, which mixes physics, psychology, and mythology, is in the book Passport to Magonia, where Jacques Vallée compares unidentified flying object reports with Marian apparitions, angelic encounters, and even medieval legends. In all of them, the narrative structure is similar: luminous beings, coded messages, levitation, time loss, mental communication. And he concludes that the phenomenon is the same, it just changes its mask over the centuries. In other words, all these apparitions of saints, of the Virgin Mary, all of this that people claim to have seen would actually be, according to Jacques Vallée, an unidentified flying object incident. He states they are not gods, they are not angels, they are not aliens, they are intelligences that move between layers of reality and shape our perception according to our culture, our time, and our context. If that's true, the unidentified flying object phenomenon isn't just physical, it's mythical. It is psychological, it is archetypal. And what the governments are hiding might not be a fleet of ships from Zeta Reticuli, but something even more dangerous. The proof that reality as we know it is malleable, unstable, and that consciousness is part of the very fabric of the universe. This week, I told you all on my Instagram that science is studying the hypothesis that the sun is a conscious entity. And from there, you can already see how Jacques Vallée's words echo within the same wisdom. But it's what I always tell you. If most people on this planet can't even process the unidentified flying object phenomenon, just imagine this even broader and deeper understanding that Jacques Vallée is proposing. These are immense paradigm shifts, which I would say are only for the most awakened minds. In any case, I want to know your opinion on this subject. Do you agree with Jacques Vallée? Or do you think that UFOs are intergalactic travelers who have crossed hundreds of millions of kilometers to reach Earth? Are they visiting us in secret? Leave your comment below. And if you agree with Jacques Vallée, comment consciousness here in the comments, because consciousness is our magic word for today. By the way, consciousness is something that many people lack, right? So comment down below. Maybe that way we can create an egregore of consciousness. An egregore that goes beyond the walls of this channel and reaches anyone else who needs awareness and critical thinking. Comment awareness here. Well, I'll stop here with this video, and I want to hear all your comments. Don't hold back your words. If I find out any more details about this sordid story or have another topic to discuss, if the sect permits, I'll return with another video. Bye.